Good morning, everyone. Scooter coming to you live from the Granville Guitars World Headquarters here in lovely St. Petersburg, Florida. Today, we have a 1970 Fender Deluxe Reverb on the bench. And I thought it was kind of interesting because a lot of people badmouth Fender Silverface amplifiers for whatever reason. Personally, I prefer them to the Blackfaces for a number of reasons. Well, primarily to do with transformers, but we'll get to that here in a minute. I haven't heard this one yet because, as you'll see here in a few minutes, it was not safe to power up. And the symptoms that the owner told me it was exhibiting kind of necessitated a look-see and a complete overhaul. Now, as we're scanning across here, let's just start down here. We've got the original Mallory bias supply cap here, 70 at 70. That is ancient, 50 years old, going to be going away. A lot of guys will replace the resistor and the diode that are also part of that circuit that are tucked in up there. I generally don't, unless they're really toasty or really bad. It's a low voltage circuit, and those components, you know, usually go a long way. You can't really see it. Maybe I can zoom in there and hold focus possibly. This is an old RCA diode there, and those guys usually go for years and years and years and years without too much trouble. Now, this is a 1970, and as we pan across here, we're going to see many things that typically denote the Blackface amplifiers, not silvers. One of the things we're going to see here, let me see if I can reposition slightly, is that the bias supply itself is that of the Blackface amplifiers. I'll move this wire out of the way, move this one out of the way. You'll notice your bias splitter resistors, which are tucked in up top there. Kind of hard to see them from that angle. Let me change angles here and see if I can get a little better view of them here. The tripod will cooperate. There we go. There they are, tucked right in there. A pair of 220Ks. You'll notice that they're gold stripe, denoting a 5% plus or minus in their rated value, which is what you want there. You want something pretty close to the rated value. Those are a Blackface feature. Now, you're saying, well, this is a Silverface, and not just a Silverface. It's 5 years into the Silverface era, which began effectively in 1965. Well, Fender didn't kind of mess around with the amplifiers for a while. You'll notice that the caps are different. The cat turds are in here, as they're so-called, these brown caps, which are probably amongst the worst sounding caps they ever used. However, I've plugged into plenty of amps that are loaded with them that sound just fine. So we're not going to knee-jerk replace any of these unless they absolutely have to. Now, you'll also notice down here your phase inverter plate resistors are Blackface values, the 100K and the 82K. Those are Blackface values. When a Silverface amp gets, quote, black-faced, all of this arrangement gets changed usually to what it is right now. So here in 1970, Fender was still doing things, a lot of things, in the manner of a Blackface amplifier. Something else we'll notice as we go over here, these bypass arrangements right here, one of them is for the reverb. I'm looking at the schematic from one eye. Let's see here. It is this pair right here. Specifically, later on, Fender did away with, I believe it was this cap, this bypass cap. Just completely did away with it and increased the value of this resistor. And that has the effect of running the driver tube, this one right here, V3, extremely hot. And it'll wear out real fast. It doesn't sound all that great. So typically we want to Blackface the reverb, but it's already there. 1970, it's still there. These white Mallories, usually pretty fine. A lot of guys, again, will, when they see them this old, they'll change them out. These are relatively low voltage, and I don't necessarily yank them out unless there's a tonal issue. More often than not, we probably do change those, but I don't pull them out, you know, unless I really have to. Even though being a 1970, it's not necessarily as highly valued as, say, as 64 would be, but it's still a vintage piece, and we kind of want to leave it alone. Now, here's something interesting on the volume pot right here. That's a bright cap, similar to what you might see on a Marshall, just chained here between these two. They did a lot of additions of things in the circuit in order to make the amp more stable rather than good lead dress. Looks a little bit more, you know, rat's nesty than the Blackface amps would look. Here's something else that's kind of interesting. This cap here is typically a .022 cap, and they've put a pair of 01s in parallel to give them that value. I've seen that before, but not very often. Apparently that day they had run out of the .022s, and they just threw that sucker in there. And we'll also see, let's see, it's right down here. This one is also a pair of caps in parallel. That one is supposed to be, again, I'm looking at my schematic. There's the tone stack. That one on the schematic is supposed to be a .022, sometimes a .047, and they've paralleled a couple of .01s. So they were, apparently that day they were out of .02s and they were paralleling these to get that value. Perfectly fine. No reason to yank those out of there unless they're, you know, just passing voltage indiscriminately. Let's see. This amp is entirely original, and I know this because the owner is the original owner. The only thing the owner has ever done to this amplifier is to replace the speaker. The original speaker blew out long ago, and it was replaced sometime in the 1980s with a pile. And it's a good sounding speaker. It'll work just fine. We're going to leave that in there. Here's something else kind of interesting. They installed a tab for a ground wire at some point in the manufacturing process, but then went ahead and installed a two-prong cord. So for some reason, this amp was given a two-prong cord from the factory, and if you look right here, move this into camera view, I've already clipped the old cord. It was a two-pronger. The end of it had been replaced and electrical taped, and so we just clipped that thing out of there. Let's flip this bad boy over, and we can see real quick here the main thing that we saw when we opened the amplifier up. I always go to the filter caps first on an amp of this age, and as we can see right down there on the main two resistors down here, these guys have blown up. Not blistered, they've leaked everywhere. So these are going to get replaced. We got 5 brand new F&Ts that are going to go in there and replace these. Typically I replace these resistors as well. Not always necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and replace them just because it's power supply, it's blunt force, it's taking a lot of punishment. I like metal oxides better in these positions. They last a long time, and do very well. Going to be putting an awful lot of tubes in here as well. Unfortunately, most of the tubes are original and most of them are bad. And it's unfortunate because there was a pair of, well, I'll show you one here. There was a pair of these in the amplifier, which is an RCA gray plate. Absolutely gorgeous sounding 6v6 tube. Unfortunately, they're both bad. So it's going to be getting a lot of new tubes. Let's just take a real quick look here. This is kind of a review for some of you. If those of you who've never seen any of my videos, we're going to look at transformer codes here. 606 being the manufacturer's code, and the digit after that is a 9. So we're going to say this is a 69 here. Yeah, 606933. If we look down here at the choke, let me zoom out. Okay, if we look here at the choke and hope that it focuses properly here in a second. I'm going to have to go in and take a closer look at it. 6060, so that's a 1970. And the power transformer also says 6069 on it. I have it on very good authority, namely my friend over at Mercury, who told me that the CSA tested has to do with Canadian testing. It's like the Canadian UL CSA. So this was tested and may have been intended for the Canadian market, but I've seen an awful lot of amps that say CSA, or that power transformers have said CSA tested on them. So who knows for sure? I don't. If you do, I'd appreciate that. Now the reverb transformer is down here, and that is a 6060. So that's a 1970 as well. All your pot codes are 1970. So we're calling this a 1970. That would be when it was manufactured. But it's getting new filter caps, and I thought that this would be interesting for everyone to see just how much in this amplifier is still in the Blackface mode. They didn't really mess around with amplifiers until quite a bit later. CBS sort of started messing with, there's the front panel. It's in decent shape. They've taken very good care of it over the years, so it's, it's fairly clean, inside and out. It's got a little dent to the front panel. It looks like it took a smack at some point. Anyway, CBS, when they took over, basically they were running things by 65. They kind of left the amps alone. They were more concerned with guitars. They immediately made guitar headstocks larger so they could be seen better on television. Being a television company, they had that in mind. Did very little to the amplifiers initially. You're going to see very few major changes in the amplifiers. The mighty little Fender Champ stayed basically the same amplifier until well into the 70s, almost to 1980, before they really started changing anything with the Champ. What you do see in the silvers is you start to see transformers that are potted with epoxy instead of wax. And what that means is that those transformers last a lot longer. When they're subjected to high heat, they tend not to have as many problems as the earlier transformers, even though those are coveted. It's one of the reasons, it's the main reason why I prefer silver faces, because with a little bit of work, a silver face can usually be made to sound pretty close to, if not identical to, its identical brother of the Blackface era, and be more dependable. And certainly a good buy. Although they've been increasing steadily for a while now, silver faces can typically be had for reasonable prices. Anyway, that's the look inside the amplifier. I'm going to get to the work here, and possibly when this is all over, we'll do a little sound test and let you hear what it sounds like. Alright, it's a few hours later. I've completed my first round of repairs to this 1970 Fender Deluxe Reverb. As you can see, all the old filter caps are gone. Cleaned everything up in there. New tin Ks up in there. Metal oxides for heat. I tend to be pretty meticulous about this work inside here. Make sure all the solder joints are good. Make sure all the flux is cleaned away. A lot of times, if I have enough slack on these wires, I'll snip them off and get fresh wire. Desolder everything. Remove all of the old solder. That screw right there had corroded pretty badly. This one right here. So I took it off and hit it with the wire brush and got it nice and clean and cleaned everything up in here. Just to make everything solid and all that sort of jazz. Now sometimes, I've said this in other videos, sometimes I will clip off the old leads and make little turrets out of the old stuff. This soldering job was not the best to begin with. Not the best work I've ever seen. So I felt confident in just redoing the whole thing. So that's what we did. Let's flip it over and take a quick peek at the inside here. Alright, as we see inside here, that is your bias supply board. There's no rectifier board in here because the Deluxe uses a tube rectifier, but in the Twins and certain other amplifiers, all of this stuff will be on a slightly larger board, and your rectifier diodes would be located up in here as well. Brand new F&T 100 UF at 100 volts. Plenty for this bias supply. More than enough. That should last a good long while. So we did that work there. Let's have a peek at the other work that I did towards the rear of the chassis. Okay, right in here we can see our new screen grid resistors. I like to use 5 waters in this particular position. Dissipates heat a little better, durability, long life. They just do the job better. And you can see down there underneath the grid stoppers, replaced those as well. The carbon comps that they originally used on these amps are pretty fine and actually contribute a little bit to the sponginess of the tone of these amplifiers. But modern carbon comps do not do the same thing as the old ones in this particular position in my estimation. So I typically do not replace those with modern carbon comps for that reason. Also, we put a new 3-prong cord on this bad boy. The owner did not have a problem with drilling a hole in this, so I've enlarged the hole. 3-prong cord went in, grounded right there to that. That was the tab earlier that I took note of that was there but had nothing attached to it. I just utilized that. We have bypassed the courtesy outlet, which is non-grounded anyway, and I always eliminate these from the circuit. The death cap and ground switch have been removed from the circuit, and the black wire from the AC direct to the end of the fuse holder, and then the white wire direct to this side of the power switch right here. So that's all for that stuff back here. It's about time to I've pretty much left the rest of it alone. I'm going to see how it behaves under voltage with tubes in it. We'll put new tubes in the amplifier and see what it sounds like and evaluate it from that point as to whether anything else needs to be done. You know, I like to leave as much of this stuff intact as possible unless it's just plain bad. So yeah, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Let's put some tubes in this bad boy and see what we get. All right. Hopefully the sawing next door is not too distracting. It's a little sound test. 1970 Deluxe Reverb. Tremolo works. Reverb works. It's very classic Fender. It might not be as swirly as some deluxes that I played. In other words, sometimes on a sustained chord, the notes will sort of envelop one another. Some amps will do it. Some amps don't do it so much. I left as much of the original stuff in there as humanly possible. All the functions work. It sounds really good. When you crank it up, this, by the way, is the little lady, the original purple scooter caster. I've had this thing since '99, 20 years now. It's actually a Philip Kubicki neck with a Brazilian rosewood board. We got a bone nut, Clouson tuners, EMG pickups. We got an SA here and an S in the middle and an S in the neck. I've got the mid-range boost here, the SPC, and the afterburner. Not going to use the afterburner, but I'm going to try some SPC here to give you an idea what this baby will do when she crunches a little. Turn the reverb down. Still relatively clean, as a good deluxe will do, and a good super reverb does the same thing, really. Get her up to about 4 or more, and it starts to get a little hairy. Volumes at 4, trebles at 4, bass is about 2.5. Reverb and tremolo are off. I've crafted a short plug for the, vibrato or tremolo, as it's actually supposed to be known. But anyway, I've put a little plug back there so you can just dial it in with the front panel knob without a foot switch. Anyway. Starts to get nice and toothy up in that range. You floor this bad boy. Let's take it up to about 7, and it's going to get nice and crunchy. Bet you didn't know that would do that. Now the normal channel, let's try that real quick. We'll turn this one down. We had that on about 7. The normal channel, to my ear, is on crunchier stuff turned up louder. It's a little thicker, I think. 2.5, and where did I say 4-ish, a little more. There it is on about 7. Now let's see what it's like pegged. Yeah, that's fun. So anyway, Deluxe Reverb, it'll crank right up there. I have it on very good authority because I actually worked on a Deluxe Reverb for him years ago. That's how Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick pretty much gets his sound in the studio. He'll take a Deluxe Reverb, normally a Silverface, I think, and just crank it all the way. And takes a Les Paul, puts it through that thing. That's his sound. That is just about it for this jewel today, I think. Same amplifier. Pretty smooth, very Fender-ish. Not a lot to complain about, really. Vintage Fenders, what can you do? Anyway, that's about all I got to say on this 1970 Fender Deluxe Reverb amp. If you have any questions about anything we do here at Granville Guitars, seek us out on the web at granvilleguitars.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And the blog is over at WordPress, A View from the Granville Bench. That's all I know for today. Have a rockin' good day.